my mini talk. I think it's going to be about trust. It connects all three themes because I had indicated, oh, maybe we should revisit listening and speaking boundaries. Oh, maybe we're going to talk about AI and all these other things. And I'm just going to land on trust as the larger theme that I'm noticing in my body, in the work that I'm doing with individuals. And what I'm seeing in the larger space is trust or lack of trust. So, zooming out for a second, trust is, in my mind, and see how it lands in your body. When I know what I'm doing is okay and how I'm being held is okay, that if it's discombobulated, it's going to work out in some way, like that we're this larger system that can hold it all and adjust as needed, right? That it's going to be okay. When there's too much of something and it gets out of whack, right? Then there's a little less trust of, is it going to come into rebalance, right? So there's this worry or anxiety of, can I count on either this other person to do what they said that they were going to do? Or can I count on me doing the thing I said I was going to do? So just notice what that feels like in your body. Trust is one of those core beliefs in young childhood that creates a worldview of, can I trust the world? And what happens is, if I cannot trust the world, my body, and I'm just going to name it from my body and the bodies that I've seen in sessions, overcompensates, starts to track the other person. How is their mood today? Have they been drinking? Did they sleep? Are they doing that little thing they do when they're lying? So what happens is this porosity becomes required to mind read to see if I can count on the other person. And I'm naming it from the wounded child perspective because that's where our worldviews are created. Okay? So in traditional therapy, the focus has historically been on the parent-child dynamic and then reworking it and redoing the attachment so it's healthy. It's typically, it can be enough, right? Unfortunately, when that wounding keeps happening, not just between the parent-child, happens within the larger family system, within the relational spaces with folks around because they've also not been able to trust, and the larger systems as a whole because they haven't been trustworthy, then what happens is therapy around a parent and child dynamic is not enough. Understanding where this dynamic is really important because then I have an opportunity to align myself with my source, so the land and the sun and my intuitive body. And I can pull myself out of that dynamic. I've called this the journalistic mind, right? When you go into a charge space, I'm like, go in like a press person and just take notes. Oh, Uncle Bob does that thing. And then Sheila does this. So interesting, right? You just go in collecting data rather than creating stories, right? You just observe the dynamic. It takes the charge out. So when we're able to observe the larger dynamic from this third person perspective, nothing wrong with them, nothing wrong with me. What is this data telling me? We are able to be mindful about our resource expenditure. Because then I'm not actively trying to think about, what does the other person want from me? Or what's their motivation? Or how am they, blah, 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 right? Like I don't go into the storytelling in that way. What happens is I observe from this third party part, right? Which is hopefully my functional adult or somewhere therein. And I start to take notes and I start to look for dynamics. And then I use my body that ideally has been cleared out with a lot of the generational muck that we've been doing, we've been clearing together in our cycle breaker groups. So the channel, the intuition, the nervous system of our body is much more attuned and discerning, right? So it's when I catch, I can't trust this person. I don't then have the muck from other generations of, maybe you misunderstood them. Or maybe the third time around, they'll come around and give you what they said they would in the peace treaty. Or maybe this time, if we say it more firmly, they'll really listen to us and give us what we need, right? Instead, we'll go, this is not a trustworthy person. They've demonstrated that they're not able to follow through. Their circle size is the same, and I'm not negotiating with them anymore. Rigid boundary, moving my energy and my resource and my time into this other place that will have more impact than on trying to convince this person or me that this person is trustworthy. Okay? So that has to do with trust. The issue, let's see if this lands for the person who asked about AI. The issue is when we have so many freaking options on the table and so much data to look through and discern, like, oh my God, do I stay here or do I go or do I? We get overwhelmed. So another adaptation to collective trauma, decontextualize, is decision fatigue. I cannot tell you how many times I'm like, I wish there was a book that said, Judy, do this with your life. I would buy that book. Anyone else buy their own book with a guide? Yes. I wish someone would just tell me what the fuck to do instead of having all of these options. So an adaptation to collective trauma of this exhaustion of what do I actually want for me, not what do I want because I'm supposed to want it, but what do I want for me in this body that I'm in this place and time that I'm in, right? If I were able to focus on that, I wouldn't get so overwhelmed, but the programming is so overwhelming that we start to get sidetracked onto these different paths that are not our path, right? So the nice thing about AI is when I ask ChatGPT, tell me how to do this thing, it pulls in all this data and then it produces, this is the best way to do it. Awesome. It's so easy. I'm just going to follow that, right? Versus Googling. I found all these articles and then I have to read them all and have to see all these things, right? But what happens is if I go with the one decision with the bias of AI that's been programmed and with the what it's taken in, it'll create one option without consideration for you as a particular being, right? And then on the other side, if I'm looking at Google and looking at all the options, it's like I get overwhelmed and I go into a rabbit hole, right? But the value of some of these options is I get to run each one through my body. And as long as I'm not looking for the right, this is going to be 100% right option, because what I'm not supposed to, I don't know. What I'm trying to figure out is what's the right next step, one step. Because when I take that one step, then I have new data for my nervous system and my body, right? But if I take all these options and I go, I'm going to do that one because in 20 years it's going to return on this type of thing. What happens is I get glommed on to the one decision. And then if at some point I'm like, oh God, I fucking hate this. But because I've already planned for this 20-year return, I can't adjust. So the thing is, what we've forgotten on both the options is I'm a dynamic human creature and I'm living in a dynamic world. And so being able to keep connected to myself while I make these micro decisions take in the information and then make the next decision, right? What happens is we start to, part of the worry or the thing I want us to consider is when we overthink this one step on how it's going to impact everybody else. The focus, the healthy boundary is focus on this. Make sure it doesn't hurt someone overly, right? But knowing that everyone else that gets impacted also is a human being and they have access to their resource and connection, and they're going to also be able to adapt, right? So I'm not making the decision for the entire globe if I don't recycle this one bottle. I'm going to stay in my boundary. I'm going to do the right thing for right now that's going to work for me. I'm going to keep the larger collective in mind because I am always part of the collective. But I don't bondage myself. I don't trap myself, right? Because it's not a right or wrong decision. It's a decision that you make in your full integrity because you're committed to being the same size as everyone else. And then trusting that the next step will show up when it's time. Someone posted, and this will be the end of the talk, Instagram thing of, I think, it's like the blossoms just blossom when it's time. There's this inherent wisdom in each of our bodies that it's unfolding exactly when it's supposed to. And how do we allow the trust that's needed that I am exactly where I'm supposed to be right now, and everything is unfolding exactly as it's supposed to be right now? That is the end of my